But the rally to a new high has not changed anything. I'll show you the resistance levels I'm looking at. And again, we're doing pretty much what we did back over here and back over here at these tops in 2021. We're pretty much doing the same thing here. And again, peak at 49,000. We'll probably peak somewhere in the low 50,000 range. Right now we're testing the 78.6 Fibonacci, which I'll show you. And again, some more Fibonacci resistance levels in the 51, 52,000, high 52,000, just under 53,000 range. I'll show you that. Again, it is likely still going to produce a top like Bitcoin futures did, like the Coinbase IPO did, and like the Bitcoin futures ETF did. Spot ETF, again, doing exactly what we did over with the Bitcoin futures ETF, which I'll show you if you watch the video all the way through. Again, this move is a bull fake. It's a bear market rally. People back in 2000 with the bursting of the tech bubble thought the same thing. Bitcoin's doing exactly what NASDAQ did with the bursting of the tech bubble. It dropped and then it came back up to a Fibonacci resistance, the golden pocket, and then the bottom fell out of it, and Bitcoin is likely doing the same thing. It's likely headed down here for a very large ABC with my Elliott wave count. Those lows are likely pointing to the next low. Bitcoin's bear market is done. The first time, or be the weakest market in history for Bitcoin, 78%. Bear markets for Bitcoin are 80 to 90%. Haven't had that yet. Now later in the video, I'll be talking about the divergence that's forming on the weekly chart because we failed to get confirmation on the candlesticks. And here it is. I'm showing you the divergence now. I'll be talking about it later when I talk about we failed to get confirmation on our topping tail in the weekly time frame. And I told you we might see triple negative divergence form the RSI. We already had a divergence at the peak there, but I told you triple negative divergence might form very similar to what we had with the top at 69. We had a multiple point divergence develop again here. That was larger because of the topping process here. Again, likely forming a triple negative divergence to form the top. To show you that RSI here in the weekly time frame, I talked about this. And again, if we continue up to the upper boundary of the channel again, you're looking to some Fibonacci resistance levels here. We're at some right now, but there are more at 51 and 52,000, so we'll be watching this area closely. You want to watch, if you want to see these resistance levels, watch the video all the way through. Taking the time to do it to show you where resistance is and where the bears are likely going to pounce on this thing once again. We're likely going to see another rug pull with this rally near Fibonacci resistance. Again, professional money is going to want to push it back down to buy Bitcoin for pennies on the dollar. Want to pay nosebleed levels for Bitcoin. Institutions with their top clients are not going to be having their clients buy a Bitcoin top. They're going to get a rug pull. They're going to wipe everybody out, retail investors, and then institutions will come in and pick up Bitcoin for pennies on the dollar. Much lower levels if we turn off these Fibonacci resistance levels, which I think we will. You might want to watch the video all the way through. Later in the video, I'll be talking about standard deviation resistance. I'll be talking about Fibonacci resistance levels. Very important stuff. We're right at those resistance levels right now. A little bit more Fibonacci resistance at 50, 51, 52,000, just under the 53,000 area. Showing you all these resistance levels. So again, you want to watch the video all the way through. This is where sellers are likely going to pounce on it. The bears are going to likely do another rug pull somewhere between 50,000 and just under 53,000 in all likelihood. And if you watch the video all the way through, I will show you why. Now, I told you I thought Bitcoin would top with the launch of the Bitcoin spot ETF. It topped that day, came back a 5% rally, ended up down 6%, sold off 10%, getting a confirmation bar the next day, and then we got the follow through and we formed this bullish falling wedge. We ended up dropping 21.44% with Bitcoin. I told you I thought we would rally back up and get a lower high, but I told you I could be wrong about the top being here because while we got confirmation in the daily time frame with the topping tail, which you have to believe is a top until proven otherwise, which now it's being proven otherwise, but we never got confirmation in the weekly time frame, as I talked about. And on the rebound back up, we've moved above the 78.6 Fibonacci. Nevertheless, we had a drop of almost 21.5%, and we hit my all-important 100-period moving average. And I predicted that we would get a rebound there. And I told you I thought it would be a lower high, but I told you I could be wrong about this being the top because of the weekly chart never getting the confirmation, which I'll show you in just a moment. It's doing exactly what it did back up at 69,000. We peaked initially with the Bitcoin futures ETF back then. 3 weeks later, we went back up and we slightly exceeded this level right here. And then we topped. And if you watch this video all the way through, you'll see we are at major resistance levels with our 78.6 Fibonacci at 50,000, and then some important Fibonacci resistance levels directly above that at 51, 52,000 or so. I'll show you those levels. We've talked about them previously late last week and over the weekend. Well, I predicted a top here. I predicted a bottom here, and here again for a lower high, but I told you I could be wrong about that. Ended up being that we are moving to a new high, that I was wrong about this being the top. It doesn't change my opinion because I know if you watch this video all the way through, you'll see why it's not going to change my opinion. Talked about, again, the previous tops in 2021 moving slightly above the previous highs. I've talked about that at great length and detail, and that's what's likely happening here. We'll show you the resistance levels in just a moment. Back testing this trend line, which is the rising wedge trend line that pushed into the upper channel. And I told you if we did go higher, you have the upper channel that could be tested again. And here's the trend line. We're back testing that right now. And again, we may exceed that and go to 51 or 52,000 or so. If stiff resistance, and right now we're coming up to the 78.6 Fibonacci, but we did exceed the 78.6 Fibonacci of this level right here, of this decline right here. So now we're going back and testing the 78.6 Fibonacci of the entire decline. I told you it was a possibility. Bitcoin is still in a topping process. What has to happen in order for this move to be bullish rather than bearish? Again, right now it's still a topping process. It's still bearish. If you watch the video all the way through, you will see why. Now, I told you I was watching the weekly chart, because again, we got the topping tail in the weekly time frame, but there was no confirmation bar. We got a doji the following week. We had a push down, but we got a bottoming tail at the 100-period moving average and our Fibonacci support levels on the Fib channel right there at this level. Formed a bullish falling wedge. That's why I predicted that we'd get a rebound, but I told you, again, no confirmation here in the weekly time frame of our topping tail candlestick opens the door for the type of top that we got into the two tops there in 2021. And we had a strong close for the week. Last week we were up 13.5%. Currently we're up another 2.64% right now at the moment. So we had a strong close as well. There was no topping tail here. What happened back at the 2021 tops is we got a topping tail. You sold off, and then you went back up, and you went slightly above this level, and then you got another topping tail. You look at the resistance levels, which I'll be showing you in a moment. Again, we're likely going to have some pretty stiff resistance there. Fibonacci is directly overhead, 50,000, 51,000, 52,000. There's some pretty stiff resistance here. But you got to have, candlesticks are meaningless. This candlestick is meaningless as a top, but you have to believe it's a top until proven otherwise, and now it's being proven otherwise, but it's meaningless unless you get confirmation. Okay, confirmation and a fall through, that has to happen for candlesticks to mean anything. Here we had a bottoming tail. Well, we eventually pushed above it right here, didn't get confirmation until this last week, and now you're getting a fall through, but it's likely we're going sideways in an overall topping process. Reversal confirmation did not take place, and that's why I told you that I could be wrong about the peak with the Bitcoin, the launch of the Bitcoin ETFs, and we could still go slightly higher and then peak. We did that twice in 2021. First time over here, we got a little topping tail in 2021. It was followed by a little hanging man bar, but there was no confirmation of that hanging man bar. Okay, we took it out. We got a bottoming tail, just like we got a bottoming tail. The recent low. We went back up. 5 weeks later, we moved slightly above that high, got a topping tail then, and that was the top. Later, that topping tail bar, it was confirmed, rebounded back up, got a lower high, and then you got your follow through after the lower high set up, and it gave you the lower high and the lower low. Very large reversal process. The second time, again, no confirmation of this bar. Well, over here, we got the topping tail. This was the launch of the Bitcoin futures ETF. We peaked the day after that. We turned down, dropped about almost 16%. 3 weeks later, we rebounded back up above that high, but the same thing here that we have right now. There was no confirmation of that bar. You didn't get a close below that topping tail bar. You have to get the confirmation bar. You didn't get it. I've showed you this example over and over again that if we fail to do that, it is still possible that we go higher. But again, it didn't stop the topping process from happening. It just took a different direction. Same thing over here. It just took a different direction because weekly bars have to be confirmed. Then we got another topping tail in the form of a shooting star, a little bit higher than that, ended up forming a divergence, which wasn't present with this peak right here. And then you got your confirmed reversal right there, confirmed reversal, and then later you got your follow through down here with this push below the confirmation bar. So again, it's likely that we're witnessing something very similar to this top here in late 2021 or this top here in early 2021 with Bitcoin resistance levels. Now over here, we were at the 67,000 area and we went up just a little bit higher to 69,000. Same thing here. We peaked just under 62,000 and then we went up towards 65,000 and then we peaked right there. So just a little bit higher in both of those cases. You're likely going to witness the same thing now. But the second peak did get a topping tail here. The second peak did get a topping tail here. So again, this week you will likely see a topping tail by the end of the week on Bitcoin. Here, the higher high was 3 weeks later. Here, the higher high was 5 weeks later, which is what we currently have right now. Bitcoin had a peak here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is the 5th week later, now pushing above that level. So we'll be watching. Do we go higher? And this was the peak at 49,000. Again, a few $1,000s higher, just like the other examples I just showed you. It would put us into low 50,000 range. Our 78.6 Fibonacci right now coming into play at 50,000, 50,300 range, and above that some of our Fibonacci resistance levels, which I'll be showing you in just a moment. I would watch this video all the way through because you're not going to know these levels unless you see them on the charts here. Now, just quickly, before we look at some of these levels, I just want to point out again, with the critical mass cloud, we got back above the critical mass line into the positive region of the cloud. We talked about that turning bullish, which again, told you that meant we were either going up with the critical mass line turning back to blue. We talked about that. Means we are either going up or sideways. We could still be going sideways. Again, we stall at the resistance levels that I'm about to show you, but the signals are showing either, again, we're going up or sideways. My guess is we're in a topping process and will likely stall at the Fibonacci resistance levels that I'm about to show you. My signals from when we called a bottom over here have been bullish, remained bullish through the uptrend, but then we formed negative divergences up here with the launch of the Bitcoin ETFs, and they turned back to bearish when we dropped 21%. And then again, we got that bottoming tail at the 100 period moving average at Fibonacci support levels, and now we're bouncing off that. So I told you I was looking for a rebound, set up a lower high or a higher high if we ended up taking up a topping tail in the weekly time frame because the candlestick failed to be confirmed. So signals went right back to bullish. So they had been bullish, went to bearish, now back to bullish, and again, likely still in a topping process. Let's look at some of our Fibonacci levels. Now, again, I told you that we predicted that we would move to the 48 to 50,000 level before the launch of the ETFs because of this upper channel, or fib channel of the parallel boundary of the channel. Came up and we hit 49,000 right on the nose, turned off that level, and I told you that was likely the top, but we needed confirmation in the weekly time frame. We didn't get the confirmation in the weekly time frame. I predicted a sell-off. We got it. I told you sellers would be lurking there. And then, by the way, down here is where the buyers come in. Up here is where the sellers have come in. And we're likely going to witness that again here just directly overhead. That's likely going to give you a topping tail in the weekly time frame by the end of this week. Now, look, we hit the 100 period moving average in the daily time frame. We got the bottoming tail, and you bounced off this Fibonacci support level, the midpoint of the parallel boundary. Turned off the upper boundary here. We bounced off the midpoint. I told you this is where buyers come in. So again, we predicted a rally. We were correct. Then we hammered along this Fibonacci. I told you we could try to find resistance here if we set up at lower high and our 78.6 Fibonacci of this decline, which we did not do. We cleared this level. Okay, we cleared it before, but we kind of bounced around it here. We cleared it at a strong weekly close. So again, we're likely going back up to test the upper boundary, now moving above this high. Currently, we're moving towards this upper boundary, which again, I talked about it being at that 51, 52,000 area. If we hit it immediately, keep going, you know, it's right there in the 51,000 range. If you take your time hitting it, then you're going on up into the 52,000 range. And here, if we take longer to hit it, there's a very good chance you're going to hit it this week. If we go higher, this is the area where I'd be looking at. And again, that's right in the 51 to 52,000 range. Right here, if we hit it within the next few days, then you're looking at it, again, somewhere around 51 or 52,000. Keep in mind that this is not the only Fibonacci level that is at this area right here. There is a confluence of resistance, which I'm about to show you. This is one of those levels. We do have our fib upper boundary channel directly overhead at 51, 52,000 or so. Somewhere between the mid 51,000 and the high 52,000 area, in that range in there. But right now, we're coming up and we're hitting our 78.6 Fibonacci of this entire decline. We're right there at it right now. We never did hit it. I talked about this at great length and detail. It was close but no cigar. We hit the 61.8 Fibonacci on the linear scaling, but here on the log scaling, we never did hit that 78.6 Fibonacci. And again, we're currently in the golden pocket. It is likely that if we overthrow the 78.6 Fibonacci here at this low 50,000 area, then the upper fib channel trend line comes into play, and some of our pitchfork trend lines been talking about. Now, I told you that if we didn't confirm the candlestick, there was still risk of going up and hitting that 78.6 Fibonacci I showed you, and also we fell short of the upper boundary, the expansion, the 1.5 expansion of the pitchfork. Now, again, from the high here to the low here, angle of descent from the lows here, again, we were just shy of it with our peak with the launch of the Bitcoin ETFs. We're now coming up and we're hitting this area right now. We may even overthrow it, that upper fib channel, but we'll be watching to see if we get a topping tail. And again, a few $1,000s above 49,000 like we had at the 2021 tops. You know, take us somewhere into that low 50,000 range, 51, 52, 50, 51, 52,000, maybe even 53,000. But we're looking at these levels of Fibonacci resistance, and this is where we're likely going to see sellers come back, show up. Now, again, we may overthrow this level. We do, and then we drop back below it, or we get rejection at it. We'll be watching to see if a reversal starts. And again, a topping tail will likely form by the end of the week with Bitcoin. Now, if I overlay the fib channel the declining pitchfork, you can see that the Fibonacci levels of resistance are here in this area. Now, here is the declining trend line of the upper boundary of the expansion of the pitchfork, which is from here to here. That's the 1.5% expansion. And then here is the upper boundary, again, of the fib channel directly above that area there. So again, a confluence of resistance in the low 50,000, 51, 52, 53,000 area. Or 78.6 Fibonacci being at 50,000, again, overthrowing that takes you up to these areas here. So again, it's going to be in this area where sellers are going to be lurking. And again, we never did quite reach it. Here we are. Again, maybe we even overthrow it. Boundaries of the channel, the low here to the high here at 69,000, down to the bottom, and the first bottom here, where the bullish diversions formed, again, could complete here with a negative divergence in this area. So we'll be watching these Fibonacci resistance levels. And then we have the Fibonacci resistance on the pitchfork. Now the pitchfork, right here, we have the high right here. Let me just zoom out here a little bit so you can see this. This was the high just before the bottom, and then we take the bottom. So this move right here, we take that and we take a measurement connecting the higher low that's set up, okay, and the higher high over here. So we have two reference points for an angle of ascent. We came back and tested the lower boundary of the pitchfork here and bounced, came up to it and overthrew it here, came up to it here, the upper boundary of the pitchfork, and then overthrew it and hit just underneath our just underneath our expansion, our pitchfork expansion. But here we came down to the midpoint of the pitchfork. It was when we pushed up through that we had the breakout. Notice here, the midpoint, we broke down. Here we just overthrew it and we bounced. But it's been acting as support and resistance. But these Fibonacci numbers are extremely important. And again, we're pushing up above this high now. And again, directly overhead, just like on our fib channel, you have the pitchfork highs, which again are coming in at that 51 or 52,000 area, depending on when we come into contact with it. We're now going to clear the 78.6 Fibonacci at the 50,000 area. Then you can go to 51,000 on into the high 52,000 area, just underneath 53,000, depending on when we come into contact with these trend lines right here, should we continue higher, which again, it's doing what it did back up at the top at 69,000. So you're probably going to go up to this 51, 52,000 area, the high 52,000, just below 53,000 area. Probably see some type of topping tail develop there and complete a top. One other thing on the Elliott wave, I told you if the Elliott wave count was that we had 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, the move was done. But I also told you if we do go higher, then it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this is 5 right here. So again, could see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something that looks like that, trying to move us towards the high 52,000 or right around 53,000 or so, that area. And depending on when we come into contact with it, and we may hit 53,000 if we take our time in doing it. But if we do it immediately, then it will be at lower levels, 51, 52, 52, the higher 52. Towards 53 if we take longer to do it. So just Fibonacci levels I'm looking at. Now again, so far we're stalling at the 78.6 Fibonacci area, okay? And again, if we clear that level, those are the Fibonacci levels that you should be looking at directly overhead. Now I want to show you a few more levels of resistance. Again, reasons why this rally is likely going to fail. And again, look at the topping process here. Look at the topping process here. It's likely a very similar topping process to that. Just quickly, while I'm thinking about it, I'm going to show you something very important in a moment, but Ethereum is not moving to a new high, and again, kind of interesting, it's forming still the head and shoulders. And we stalled at the upper channel here from this high to this high right here, which is a perfectly parallel boundary with these lows over here. So again, just something worth paying attention to. Does Ethereum make a lower high? Well, Bitcoin makes a higher high. Do they diverge? Which oftentimes they do diverge. And again, I just want to take the time to show you this because it really is important. Right now, Bitcoin is moving higher, but Ethereum is not. And again, at the bottom, Bitcoin actually got a slightly higher high. Ethereum got a higher low. They diverged at the peak in July. They diverged again, and that marked a turning point. We got the sell-off from the July high. They diverged at the bottom. Bitcoin made a new low. Ethereum did not. Back at the top in the second peak of 2021, Bitcoin moved higher. Ethereum made a lower high. Back in the first peak in 2021, Bitcoin had peaked. It made a lower high. Ethereum went and made a higher high. Oftentimes they diverge. In many cases, Ethereum makes a lower high while Bitcoin makes a higher high. In this case, Ethereum made a higher high while Bitcoin made a lower high. But divergences from one another have marked tops and bottoms. It marked the bottom. It marked the tops over here. And again, marked important turning points. So again, here we have it again, something worth paying attention to. If Ethereum cannot make new highs and Bitcoin does, may mark a Bitcoin peak. As I've told you, Bitcoin follows the 100 period moving average. When you drop below it, you're consistently dropping. Here we had a fake out and we were consistently below it. We got above it here. Here we went sideways and now we're above it and we're bouncing off of the 100 period moving average. Bitcoin follows the 100 period moving average. Here we're at the second ATR, which is the average true range of price, and again likely going to stall here at the second or third ATR and likely peak and form again reference point of a divergence in completing a divergence in the weekly time frame as I talked about. So Bitcoin top stalled around and third ATR. Again, just under the third ATR was the second Bitcoin top at 69,000, stalling near the second ATR. And here we are testing the second ATR right now. We're just above it, moving towards the third ATR. Now, again, this is important because these areas of resistance are at the same levels as our Fibonacci resistance. And again, the second ATR, we're pushing up through it near the 49,000 area or 48,000 area or so. And we're pushing up. And here the third ATR is up here in the 52,000 range at the current moment. We got rejection here at it, went sideways. We got rejection here just underneath it and turned down and moved back to the 100 period moving average. So here we are, the second ATR. The third is up here. It is likely we're going to stall around the second and third ATR here somewhere near the Fibonacci levels that I've been talking about. Now, here, right here, is the average price of Bitcoin. Okay? We're above that area. When Bitcoin topped, first peak in 2021, we peaked. We were 2 and 3 standard deviations. We were 3 standard deviations, but then came down to 2 above the average price. Bitcoin came down to its average price and bounced, went back up, went slightly higher, but could not go up to the second and third standard deviation. But this time found resistance at the 161 expansion of Bitcoin's average price. It stalled there. That's this green line right here. Do you see how it stalled there? It had a peak, just like what we're doing right now. It had a peak, and then it went up, and it tested that peak, and it didn't quite reach it. And then it turned down. The yellow line is the 1.38 expansion of average price, and it stalled here initially, stalled here, and then we got above it, and you stalled at the 1618 expansion, standard deviation above the average price. You did the same thing over here. When we got back above price here, we bounced off of it. When we got back above it over here, the average price, we stalled at that 1.38 standard deviation above the average price. We eventually got back above it over here and got back above it. We've moved up into the 1.61 standard deviation, and we're now testing it again. In order for Bitcoin to be bullish, you've got to start moving above that level and then staying above it like we did during the run-up, we stayed above that little green line. Do you see this? You stayed above it, okay? And now it is acting as resistance. We stayed above it, we dropped below it, it became resistance, and now we've come back and it's resistance again. Again, keeping with the Fibonacci levels that I showed you, pitchfork, the Fibonacci levels I showed you on the channel, here we are, finding Fibonacci resistance again at that same area. And again, this is the, the 51, 52,000 area here is where this is coming in at. It looks like it's in the 51,000 range, but it's in that same area. And this is where we stalled out on the last two peaks as well, right here and right here. And now we're going slightly higher. So maybe we overthrow this level a little bit, maybe we don't. Now we're hitting the 78.6 Fibonacci at 50,000, but if we go a little higher, we'll hit this level. But again, same thing. We stalled at the 1618 expansion of the standard deviation above Bitcoin's average price at the top. Okay, and here we are at it again. We're for the bulls to have a move right now, right here, going forward. We got to be able to clear this level and then hold above it like we did over here. With the run up. Wave 3, you were able to hold above that level and stay above that level. And here, you're stalling at it. Here, you stalled at it. Even though we went higher, you still stalled at that level. So this is an important level of resistance that we're at right now. And again, a confluence of resistance here with the 1618 standard deviation above average price. This Fibonacci standard deviation, Fibonacci resistance is at the same level as the pitchfork and the upper channel. Again, this low 50,000 range, 51, 52,000 levels we're looking at just under 53,000 or so, between 50 and 53,000, if you will. But again, if we get rejection in this area, which I believe that we will, I think you'll see a topping tail likely before the week ends. Then we'll be looking, if we drop back below 1.38 Fibonacci standard deviation above average price. And if you do, then you're likely headed to average price, which is, again, at the 32,000 area. When we got rejection, what added over here, we ended up dropping back below the 1.38 standard deviation, and you move back to the average price. And then eventually you broke through it, and it became resistance. And then you eventually came down to standard deviation levels where a bottom formed down here. So again, I was looking at the long term, and again, gave a sell signal at the top over here in the first top, never validated this breakout as a bullish signal at all. Nothing. The signal remained extremes with standard deviation. Now here we reached extremes, and it called it a little bit early. We went a little bit lower and tested that level. The long-term signal, it's still bullish. If we get rejection here, we'll be watching if the signal turns back to bearish near the 1618 standard deviation above average price. Now, if I put the pitchfork up here with standard deviation of Bitcoin's average price, if we get rejection at the fib level, 1.5% fib level of our pitchfork, again, we're right here at the same area. And again, maybe we overthrow this level a little bit and hit the upper boundary of the fib channel or the rising pitchfork, as I showed you earlier. But again, what's likely going to be the case is a measured move. And again, if we get rejection here, the 161 standard deviation above average price, as we did over here, you could see a measured move that could take you to the lower end of the pitchfork here, which again, if we get rejection here, then standard deviation levels would likely move down towards that area. And when we tag standard deviation, as we did at these levels here, giving us a rebound, forming a bullish diversion, you'll likely see something similar to that as we come down here again throughout 2024 in all likelihood, should we get rejection here. Now again, why do I believe that? Because we're going to have a recession and we're going to have another banking crisis, and the stock market's going to peak, and it's going to have a negative reaction to a Fed pivot lowering rates. If the stock market goes down, so is Bitcoin. It's going to go down too. They have a positive correlation. Bitcoin doesn't follow the halving, it follows the economic data. It follows in close relationship with the stock market. It is going to top and going to sell off with all this stuff and have a bear market. So just so you know, again, some very interesting Fibonacci levels, but standard deviation here, if we get rejection, again, I'm looking for a move that will eventually bottom down over here. And again, people don't think that's possible, just like they don't think it's possible that the stock market tops. And again, the first peak was at 3 standard deviations above the average price. The second peak was at the 161 expansion, standard deviation above average price. Rejection there, we didn't bottom until we hit down here to standard deviation below price, below the average price. So again, just things to be watching. Like I said, if Bitcoin didn't top with the first peak, and I was wrong about that, it would likely top with the second peak and get a top very similar to these other tops that formed that I have been featuring in the videos. See if we get a topping tail by the end of the week. We'll see if we get rejection in the 50,000 to just under the 53,000 area, 51, 52,000 or so. If we go a little bit higher, where do we get rejection? At the 78.6 Fibonacci. We may overthrow it at upper fib channel, then overthrow the upper boundary here, as I've said, right around that 50,000 area. But you have stiff Fibonacci resistance at the ATR resistance, as I showed you earlier, Fibonacci resistance levels. See what happens. You expect the move to fail. You're watching to see if we get a topping tail on the weekly chart this week.